This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. I'm a business sounding board. Think somewhere between a business coach and a business mentor. I help business owners not to be lonely at the top. In this week's episode, we speak to Lee J. Walker, Joint Managing Director at thebusinessdesk.com. Lee explains to us the essential business skills learned from being an engineer and an Army reservist, the importance of understanding different cultures when doing business internationally, and, from his own experiences, what to look out for when doing an MBO. He also tells us why 3.5 million people per year read thebusinessdesk.com, what their business model is, it's ACE by the way, and how the business desk was affected by and then responded to the COVID pandemic. To make sure you never miss out on every episode of the Leeds Business Podcast, sign up to our priority list at www.leedsbusinesspodcast.com. Everyone that signs up gets a free gift to help their business. So, let's get into what is a really absorbing interview. So, today's guest is Lee J. Walker, Joint MD at the Business Desk. Hi, Lee.
Good afternoon, Phil. How are you?
I'm good. Sorry, I've just called you Lee, and it's officially Lee J. Do you want to just tell us listeners about your name?
I've spent my entire life explaining this. I'm Lee J. I've got two older brothers with very, very well, sort of standardized names. And I was named after an American actor called Lee J. Cobb. There's very few people are familiar with him, but that's where the name comes from.
Fantastic. Okay, Lee J. So we were talking before, you started your professional career as an engineer.
I did, yeah. I left school when I was 16. Unfortunately, I didn't apply myself too much at school. I think they call it neurodiversity or whatever. I call it just messing around a lot at school and staring out windows because my brain was going too fast. But I was given a job as an apprentice engineer. Apprenticeships seem to be the buzz things nowadays, and I did a full-time job for 5 or 6 years, and evening school for 5 or 6 years as well. So I think engineering stood me in good stead for business, really.
What do you think you learned from your time as an engineer that's applicable in the business world nowadays?
We did installation work and commissioning work for large. We started with religious places doing sound systems, and we ended up doing things like, so I ended up commissioning the Millennium Dome as or the Lowry Centre in Manchester for their voice evacuation systems. So as I learned engineering, it sort of taught me to be quite methodical in everything that I do and have a process in thinking. And that's something that I very much, in business now, when I'm thinking through troubleshooting and problem solving, everything's got there's always an answer, and there's always ways that you can wade through things or work through things, should I say.
And that's something actually I find as a business sounding board, it's that logical process that I think sometimes business owners just get too close to things to think logically. So you started as an engineer. How did you get into the business world?
I at the time when I was sort of young, knocking around with all my friends, a lot of them went off to university or went to college and studied sort of business. And business studies seemed quite en vogue in the mid 90s for a lot of people. And I went off and did this apprenticeship in engineering, and then I'd always fancied working in business. I realised that when I was an engineer, I could talk to people, and I could definitely do the sales element of people. So I got to, I think I was 21 years old, and I decided to go travelling around the world. So I did that for a year, went to Australia and all across Southeast Asia. And when I came back, instead, I decided, well, I can either go back into engineering or I can start to pursue a career in sales. And somebody gave me a fresh job in recruitment, working as a engineering recruitment consultant. So really focused on that for a few years, top billing consultant everywhere I worked. And my application on that was just work very, very hard, work harder than the next person, That taught me a lot as well of understanding the how businesses work out there, how businesses interconnect, how businesses, how businesses work internally, but then how they work externally with other types of business across the spectrum. And that then led me into a whole variety of different recruitment roles, where I ended up being the group sales manager of recruitment for Manpower in the Middle East, which wasn't a long-lived job, but a very enjoyable one, and great to be out in the Middle East, in Dubai, for a few years. And then the financial crisis happened, but I've jumped a few jobs there ahead.
So you went through a number of jobs. I mean, what was the trigger to move on? Was it just a desire to develop, or opportunities? How did that come about?
I think when I was younger, I always had a lot of ambition to be to get very senior in a company and drive teams. And I think by the time I got to the job at Manpower, if I'm being honest, I probably didn't have as much as experience as what I would have wanted for a job like that. Prior to that, I'd been a sales director and built a couple of startups. Sales teams, which did very well. We launched an online job board in the Middle East, and we did $800,000 in our first year. We built a sales team up to 12 people there. So yeah, very successful. But on the leadership front, probably by the time I got that job at 29, it was sort of like the sort of job I should have been doing after few more years in leadership experience before I got into that role. But now I look back, but it taught me well, because it was a baptism of fire, and took me on to working at the business desk where.
Right. What specifically do you think you lacked, apart from experience in that early leadership role?
Yeah, I think I was always plagued by thinking about not having the experience of being university educated, and also not having a solid formal education within business studies. When I look back now, I actually realise that how we kicked off this conversation, my engineering, my experience of dealing with problems and working within startups, that taught me a lot more than probably what I could have ever really learned in any formal education. But and I suppose also a bit of maturity as well. But at 29 and sat on the board of a big company and have 90 people reporting to you in the Middle East is quite a daunting job. Now it wouldn't bother me, but back then I was like, whoa, this is a lot of responsibility, especially at a time when there was a financial crisis going on.
Right. Just go back slightly. You said you launched a startup, the job board. Talk us through that. How did that come about? And again, what did you pick up, and what did you learn from that?
As part of when I was a recruitment consultant, I was recruiting for a new startup company in the UK called I think it was called ScottishJobs.com, and then they wanted to launch a new startup job space called North England Jobs. So I was in the TA. I did some work with the reserves in the military for some time, which we can talk about and come back to. And I after completing that, I took a job with them, and we launched a job called NorthEnglandJobs.com out of Leeds, which was very, very successful. And it was so successful that they closed us down and bought our competitor. And they offered us jobs at our competitor, the My Job Group, or would me and my colleague like to go out to Dubai and do a raw startup from a hotel foyer called RecruitGolf.com? So we just said, yeah, let's do it. And that was essentially just doing hard sales from a hotel foyer at first. And we brought on board lots of big companies like Emirates Airlines and all of the biggest companies in the Middle East, because they were looking to attract people from all over the world, especially European educated, into the Middle East. That was the job at Sayon Group. And the Sayon Group was, I think it's been sold now, was run by or owned by Leslie Buckley and Dennis O'Brien, who are a couple of the richest guys in Ireland. So that was a real steep learning curve as well, reporting into people like that, and to a billionaire and to another multimillionaire who wasn't very patient with on the new startup fronts.
Right. Okay. So I mean, we're recording this in a very drizzly, grey Leeds late October day. and you were offered the chance to go and work and live in Dubai for a while. Tough call?
It was a tough. It was at first, once the honeymoon period had worn off, it was a bit tough, yeah, because but the guy that I went out there with actually left and came back. Uh, he was the guy that got me the job at the business desk, and unfortunately, was no longer with us. But so it became a lonely at first, and then establishing a company on my own over there. Yeah, it was. But I'm sort of blurred all that out with a lot of beaches and a lot of brunches and a lot of enjoyment and going out a lot, and networking.
Oh, right. That's what they call it, networking.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned something a couple of minutes ago. You were in the TA and you were a reservist. Again, sort of similar to the engineering side of things. What did you learn in that period that again contributes to, I think, what you're doing now as an MD and a business owner?
Certainly a lot around teamwork, leadership, operating with integrity, working very hard. I was in a specialist unit in the reserves, which took a selection process to get in. I did it a lot. I did it, some years 120 days a year, whilst having a full-time job. It just taught me a lot of discipline, really. And, I like to, used to also working with a lot of very competent and capable people as well. And, having driving that attitude that even when when things are difficult and when the chips are down, or when people, sometimes you think you can't do something, there are ways that you can actually achieve still your objective, with a lot of hard work and a lot of ingenuity.
Right. Again, it's similar to the engineering. It's finding a solution to the problem.
Absolutely. And, all of that has taught me well in my 14 years at the business desk. When I joined the business desk, we set up very successfully by a well-known person in Leeds, David Parkin and Paul Snape. They had a great idea. They had a great concept, a great network, a great audience. They'd only been going a couple of years when I joined. And I joined to launch their West Midlands region on the commercial front. And we did it massively successfully. And then they exited a few years later, and I became a commercial director. And eventually then on a few years after that, did a management buyout with my colleague, Alex Turner. But through that period, there's been a lot of change and a lot of pivoting and a lot of, resilience application by us because of the changes in media and the changes in the economy. We've seen pandemics, for instance. It's been a really interesting time. Our media company is a free to subscribe to media company. We don't earn money off, people subscribing to us. So we earn money off advertising content and events. And then the advertising world has very much changed a lot with regards to the rise of pay-per-click or, SEO or programmatic style advertising. So we've always had to be very resilient and thinking about what we do, how we can pivot and change to market conditions as well.
I'll come back onto that. We've jumped a little bit ahead, haven't we? So we're in Dubai. We're networking on the beach. What did you pick up from that? What did you learn? What were the hard bits about doing that apart from the loneliness? And is it a very different business environment out there?
I think one of the greatest things that I learned was dealing on an international level and dealing with different cultures. Dubai really is a massive melting pot of a variety of different cultures. It's got a very large UK, British expatriate, people there. It's you have to deal differently on different sales fronts with different cultures there, whether or not it's the Emiratis or whether it's you do a business with an Indian subcontinent. And one of the things I learned how to deal is when you're dealing with people when English isn't the first language. and that taught me a lot. But also the nuances with business as well. Dealing with business in the Middle East was very much about people didn't used to say no to no, we don't want to do this. There wasn't as blunt as there might have been, doing sales in Yorkshire. People were a lot more polite sometimes, and sometimes you had to see through what were buying signals from doing business with people, and really knowing what you can concentrate on and what you can't concentrate on. And that's taught me well actually as well now, because we know instinct, I've got a sixth sense in business, what is what I call a prospect or a suspect. What is worth investing in, from a business opportunity perspective, and what is, something that's never going to happen. And that's something I always try to rub off on my sales team as well, how to really get down to that.
Right. Okay. And what was the trigger to come back to the UK then?
It wasn't a great story. I'd moved to Manpower. There was the financial crisis happening, and then there was almost like a second wave of financial crisis happening in the Middle East at the time, because DP World, there's a lot of problems around that, and it was at the time when the Burj Khalifa Tower was, named after the Abu Dhabi families there. There was a lot went on there. I literally saw a lot of, if you looked at Dubai Marina, you could see the lights going off and, the opportunities diminishing. There really wasn't a lot of roles for someone at the salary level that I wanted. I also wanted to come back. I wanted to come back and rejoin the armed forces as well. So I did. I decided I was doing a bit of interim work over there. And then I thought, no, I'm going to come back. And I came back and I joined the business desk.
Before we get on to talking about the business desk, I just want to share with everybody the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Fair Deal has two sides to it. My side of it is I bring you inspirational, motivational, and interesting guests every week, free of charge, like Lee J. You, the listener, have two parts to your side of the Fair Deal. Part number one, I want you to share this podcast with just one person you think will get benefit from it. Part number two is I want you to post a review, either at the Apple Podcast app, at podchaser.com, or give us a thumbs up on Spotify. Or if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a thumbs up and a review. Sound like a fair deal, Lee J?
I think that sounds like a fair deal.
There you go. Lee J says it's a fair deal, so you've got to do it. So, we've left Dubai. We come back to the UK. Take us forward from there.
Yeah, I'd kind of lined up the conversation to get a job at the business desk through a guy called Phil Birkhead, who was the original guy who set up the Recruit Golf with me in Dubai. He took the lead on a lot of the sales at the business desk. I was invited in. I remember meeting David Parkin. I can still remember the interview very clearly, actually. It was an enjoyable interview. And within a couple of weeks, I'd started at the business desk launching the West Midlands region. At that time, the business desk had Yorkshire running very successfully because, David was a very well-known character within the Leeds business community. Some of the board involved in the business desk were very much throughout the professional services spectrum within the Leeds business community, and they'd also just launched in the Northwest. So they actually brought the launch forward of the West Midlands region because I came and they'd recruited a really good editor down there called Mark Reeves, who's now at Reach PLC, and we went out there with this new proposition. So I actually didn't move to Birmingham, and instead was driving there and back 3 days a week. Whilst doing a full day's job, or every now and again staying over, or sometimes when I staying over, staying in a travel lodge or an ibis, which was a bit of a culture shock considering I was used to gold taps in Dubai. So, but yeah, in the first year we did met our sales targets down there, and then I moved into more of a Northwest role because we recruited a team in the West Midlands, because we weren't performing there, and took the lead, again, working with a really experienced editor there to turn that around and turn that successfully. And then, as I say, the original owners of the company exited, and a guy called Mark Hales bought the company. And at that point, sort of looking at different ways to do it, up it, let's say, up the revenues, up the scale of it, and really turn it on. So I went away and I wrote a business plan, submitted it to him, and over a weekend, and then I think shortly after I was made commercial director to take the sales team forward.
So let's just take it a step back, one step, just for those who don't know businessdesk.com. Do you want to explain what it was and then what your business plan sort of said going forward?
Slightly self-arrogant, I suppose, of me, because I do a lot. I always assume that most people are aware of the business desk, and it's not. A lot of people know about it, but not everybody. But so we are a regional business news company. We provide business news to business people, and to put that into context of numbers, we're expecting about 3.5 million unique users read our pages this year. We're heavily subscribed to by professional services. So you generally find corporate teams within professional services subscribe to us, as well as property, because we do a dedicated property email as well. So most people at a senior level, I always say, if you're sitting on a board, reasonable sized board, decent sized company, at some point you're probably going to come into contact with the business desk in the regions that we operate in. And we operate in Yorkshire, the North West, the Midlands as a whole, and the South West as well. And it's every day an email will land in an inbox by about 8:30. It'll have about between 10 and 15 stories on there. And it'll just be useful information for people that work in business. People read it because they want to know what's going on in their own regional landscape. They may just want to find out what their peers and their networks are doing themselves, or they use it for lead generation themselves to have a look at where the opportunities are. Certainly, we are a news company. We do try and report on a lot of positive news and support the business community. Equally, we do report on insolvencies and so forth, and still a lot of those insolvencies get most of the big hits. They're the big stories that people like to. Bad news still sells, unfortunately, but that's just the nature of people's interests in media. So that's what we do on the face of the business desk. But underpinning that from a commercial perspective, we're a marketing and business development organisation. We provide a whole variety of different marketing services, whether or not it's branding through advertising, driving traffic to people's websites, or thought leadership. We create reports, or leading lawyers and accountants might go on and talk about how you get access to finance at the moment and how that can help entrepreneurs and business owners out there. Could be on a number of different subjects. People will write all sorts for content on our pages. And then we also do a lot of events, and our events have really ramped up in the recent years. We do 200 events this year, which, a lot of them are round tables, private events, but we do a lot of awards events. We're doing we're doing a conference this week in Leeds. I don't know when this podcast is going out, but it's on November the 2nd. And then we've got another big conference called our Rainmaker Conference in Manchester on March the 20th next year. So yeah, lots of business networking, lots of business interaction.
Right. Okay. So, you mentioned it earlier. You've got sort of 3 commercial arms to the business. So there's the events, there's the advertising.
Yeah, ACE, advertising, content, and events. So yeah, but the events are driving about 75% of revenues to the business now.
Right. Okay. So would you almost see the editorial as a lost leader, sort of free news as a way in to get in front of people?
I see it as a marketing budget in many respects, if I was going to be brutally, candid about, it on a balance sheet, because we don't heavily invest in any marketing spend ourselves, because we've already got the audience. So that's what it is. It's outbound marketing is the news to generate interest to sell the services that we have. So we're always thinking of ways that we can service that congregation, that audience, whether or not it's uh, an event, a fun event, something more serious, a report, a property event. We even launched this regular wine tasting, to have a a fun networking around wine tasting. So we're always open to just thinking, okay, we've got a lot of professionals, we've got a lot of executives within our audience. How do we provide content to them and events that are going to be of benefit and use to them?
Right. Okay. Okay. So, would you see yourselves as competitors to something like the Yorkshire Post, or do you, particularly the business side of things, business section, or do you complement that? How, and that you've got Business Insider and all those. Are they all competition as well, or are they again slightly different?
Yeah, I think we don't. I mean, we don't really come up against the Yorkshire Post much. I think I think there's, I always want to see regional newspapers succeed. Because the business element to the Yorkshire Post is only a very small element of what they do, and I think what they do is a great job. Across the media news spectrum. Insider, you mentioned, yeah, Insider are direct competition to us. Equally, we are a purely digital publication and always have been. They've got different facets to that. They've also got a publication magazine as well. We have launched direct competitive brands against them. Our Rainmaker brand being one of it that goes against their deal makers, and we launched that because we thought there was a space. That some people like Pepsi, some people like Coca-Cola, don't they? And you've got two big players within the caramel carbonated drinks arena. It's so yeah. That's how I see as an insider. And people will have their preferences, or a lot of people out there may even receive both publications. I don't know.
Let's go back a step. So we've talked about Business Desk as a product. Let's talk about it as a business. You said you were brought in on the commercial side, and then it was sold, and then you did an MBO. Talk us through that. How did that happen?
I think it was always the plan for the investor who bought the company to not manage it long term. It was always a plan to either an exit on a trade sale or do an MBE. He built up an internal senior leadership team. So that's how that came about. And I was over time sort of drip fed more and more responsibility. I had the commercial director responsibility, and then started to write the business plans, started to do all the recruitment elements. The only bit of the business I very much don't get involved in still to this day, my colleague Alex Turner does, is all what I call the creative element to what we do, and the content. So I'm dyslexic. I can't write a paragraph without making mistakes. So I'm never going to be a quality writer. But the responsibility of the business, I took more of. We did the MBO. We did that through I can't really go into detail, but through a process that we were pay back a lump sum money over a certain amount of years. We're nearly there with that now. We did that in 2017. We're at the end of 2017. We didn't have much money in the bank, so it was going a few steps back with the business, and then we pumped in. We're just getting into it, and then obviously the pandemic happened, which was really, really good fun. When we, two guys had just done an MBO only a couple of years before. So, but
perfect timing.
Yeah, and at that stage, we'd identified with the MBO that we were going to really wanted to drive our event side of our business out of the advertising, content, and events. We knew we had to really drive that. That was the big opportunity for us. And obviously, when the pandemic happened, literally overnight, it was how do we get around this then? What do we do now? And from I heard stories of companies struggling, not having servers and not being, integrated on clouds and things like that, and not everyone having laptops, etc. We weren't like that when the pandemic happened. We just sent everyone home, and everyone had a laptop. Everything that we did was digital based. Everything that we did was paperless. So we were well set up on that front, but we were really disadvantaged because we had about 100 events planned that we had to postpone, delay, cancel, work through. Some of them we replaced with digital events, and it was a tough time for us. I tell the story, which is it happened, and I went to bed crying into my glass of Malbec, thinking, I've been spending 10 years at the business desk working towards this, and overnight sort of pretty much shut down by government because we couldn't drive the income, the revenue, because it was through people meeting each other in person.
Yeah. Wow. That must have been really tough.
It was tough, but I'm very resilient, and fortunately, we had a team at the time that just got on board. I mean, I've told this story before where I've nearly started crying, where I couldn't believe that how the culture in our company at that time was amazing. Like, everybody was like, yeah, let's get this done. And what we quickly realized in the pandemic was that this isn't a bad thing for us, because we own a digital space. We have a digital audience. We have a need to, people have a need still to try and carry on with business. People have need a channel out to market. So we looked at that and we thought, okay, how are we going to do that? So LinkedIn, to me at the time, just seemed like, I said it was like Content Crush. You just had so many businesses sort of all scrambling to get in, their only information. That was sort of some of their only routes out to market to try and get their business message out, whether or not it was support, accountancy, law firms, etc., supporting their clients or whatever they wanted to be seen to be supporting, etc. And so we realized, well, we're on the content side of things, we've got a really strong position, and we've got a really strong voice to market, and we capitalized on that with a lot of. I actually at that time as well remember phoning round, people in senior positions in the marketplace, literally saying, "Can you support us? Can we do you a deal? What do you want? We want some money throwing our way. We'd like you to support us, and we will. Here's the keys to the safe, almost. What do you want? What do you want? We'll do these deals." And I won't name any names, but I'm very grateful for some businesses out there that actually took the opportunity to go, "Do you know what? We'll support you." And then the other element was that we looked at our events and we just went, well, webinars. Let's do lots of webinars, and we sold loads of them. We did lots and lots and lots. So in that pandemic, all of those things that I was talking about earlier, the engineering mindset, the resilience mindset, that all got tested and got put into play, and we still made a profit that year, and we only furloughed our events team, and I'm very grateful, because I think it was that time where we sorted ourselves out a lot more, got a lot more organized, got a lot more structured. We secured our place. We saw an increase in traffic, and all different positives came out of that for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, as an online business serving the business community, whilst obviously it's commercially it's a shock to you, you actually were in the right place to take advantage of that move to online that everybody had to do.
Absolutely. I mean, it always surprised me when I started at the business desk in 2010. Even in 2010, what's the internet had been around, prolifically for 13, 14 years or something like that, when did Google launch? 98, was it, or something? But in 2010, when we launched the West Midlands business desk, I remember meeting partners of some firms and trying to almost sell the concept of digital and the internet to them still. And I was like, I can't believe I'm having these conversations. These conversations are 10 years out of date, but then I said the pandemic even accelerated that digital. If you weren't a digital business, then then what were you doing? You had to have a digital strategy, and that's why we talk about a lot about digital transformation now, et cetera, and all businesses harnessing that. But I think it accelerated it a lot more during the pandemic. And yeah, we did. We felt like we land grabbed during that period, and capitalized our position around being a go-to digital business media.
Okay. Just back onto the MBO. Somebody who's looking to do an MBO now, what would you advise them? What are the good bits? What are the bad bits? What are the bits to look out for?
Oh, I mean, I've never said this publicly, but one thing I will say is, my co-director is I pulled the budget together and the plan together, and that was all great. But the stuff that I really needed support on was all of the legals, and he was very, very good at that. And that's that would be stuff to watch out on for me if I was doing it again, and having a really good trusted advisor on the legal front to make sure that everything is gone through in detail. Equally, we were well supported by, we had a great relationship with the investor who was selling us. He's still in the business, still a shareholder in the business, so he didn't exit completely. But just really understanding thoroughly all the legal aspects and the implications of them is something to really, spend time getting down to on anything like that.
Right. So the easy bit is putting the business plan together. It's all the dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say putting the business plan together was easy, because I don't think we met we didn't achieve it exactly how we wanted to achieve it in the first few years, and we still I still think now you put a business plan together and then a few months later things change and not go out of the window, but you have to always be willing to be flexible and agile, and so yeah. But putting the business plan, we knew what direction we were going in anyway, because we were already ingrained in the business. So we knew what the business, what direction it needed to go in. Obviously, at that time, if we would have known a pandemic was coming down the road, we may have factored that into our equations when we were, writing the business plan, or being a little bit more, thinking about the digital aspect and webinars and things like that, which at the time we didn't at all. So yeah, I think if anyone's thinking about an MBO and doing that, I would say, I heard a quote once from, was it Richard Branson, who said, if you're not sure how to do something, say, yes, I'll do it, and then figure out how to do it later. I don't advise that all the time in business, but I do think there's going to be a lot of elements around self-doubt when you're doing an MBO. Can I do this? Am I ready for this? I don't know how to do this, etc. There's going to be all them questions. The fact of the matter is that you're always going to be like that in business. You're always not going to know everything. You're always going to be looking. You're often going to make wrong decisions. The best thing is to recognize them, and then that the old correct, not protect. But yeah, so it's worth it, is what I would say. It's very stressful, but don't let the bigger picture sometimes confuse too much, because it's worth pursuing, and you should just break down targets into bracket them, and these are the targets. This is what I need to do here. This is how I'm going to achieve this. Wars are won by lots of small battles, really.
Very true. And I think your point about, being out in business, we never know everything. And there's, if you don't come across stuff that you don't know, you're not stretching yourself enough anyway, are you?
Absolutely. I mean, we are constantly taking ourselves out of the comfort zone, every day. And I think the thing in media as well, and I can't speak for all companies, but certainly you have to keep being different, and you have to keep innovating and improvising and being different all the time, because it's different to other businesses where I'm going to make this machinery, and you might have a longer sales time on things, and that may run for a few years, and then then you might have to innovate and to stay ahead of it. But in our business, all the time we're always having to change things and be ahead of the game, and know what the market wants as well.
Absolutely. Now, every week on the Leeds Business Podcast, we ask our esteemed guests to give us a how-to. So, over to you, Lee J.
I think, like I always encourage everybody, is how to get on with things, and especially on a commercial front as well. Say our sales team. I always say, engage with people, speak to them, talk to them. You don't always need to do lots and lots and lots of research before you speak to people. Certainly on a commercial front, sometimes it's just good to know what they do. You can find out all the rest of the information that you need to learn by having that conversation. The better thing in business is to have as many conversations and meet as many new people as possible all the time. So my advice always is, I always say, let's get on the dance floor and have a boogie and not tiptoe around it all the time. It's so my how-to is either pick up that phone or do direct marketing. If you're not sure about something or you're thinking about something, speak to the right people and just make sure them conversations happen. Get out there and proactively always be speaking, whether or not it's a sales or it's a problem that needs addressing or whatever. Engage and talk about things and get into it. There's no point just overthinking things, and there's no point researching things over the top all the time, because it's that thing that will kill you, that procrastination, I think, in business.
Right. So avoid procrastination, and as I always say to my clients, JFDI.
JFDI. Go on then. What's that?
Yeah. Well, I won't tell you what the F is, but the J is just. Right. And the D and the D and the I do it.
Yeah, exactly, and I see that a lot in people that we manage or have managed over the years. That sometimes, I'm not sure how to do that, so I'm not going to do it, or I don't know how to engage with them, so I'm not going to do it, or I've sent one email and I haven't heard back with them. It doesn't mean someone doesn't want to do business with you. It doesn't mean someone doesn't want to come speak at one of your events. It doesn't mean anything. It just might be that they're so busy. But sometimes when you have a conversation with people, things happen. Beautiful things happen when you talk to people, and I think engagement is, and that's something that I think we've lost in that's the irony about the role or the contradiction. We're a digital business, but in a digital world now with digital marketing as well, it's that we losing sometimes the element of talking. It's something that we hear back from the business community all the time. People need to meet people more. People need to talk more. It's that creates business opportunities and creates networks and creates long-term friends as well. So yeah, JFDI. I like it.
There you go. You can borrow that. If you see that in the businessdesk.com very soon, you'll know where it came from. And finally, the last thing, we ask all our guests to give a shout out to another Leeds business. So Lee J, who are you going to give a shout out to?
I'm going to give a shout out to Curve Block. So Curve Block is a really, really, really interesting business that is just on the precipice of flying off and doing wonderful things at the moment. We've been supporting that business. We supported them with some marketing a few years ago. They're a fintech business born out of Leeds, and they are wanting to change the world of property investment by democratizing property investment. So it's kind of like, it's not like a cryptocurrency, but you can invest into it and have digital shares in them. And then what they do is they only focus on building property developments that are 100% energy positive. So they actually produce more, electricity than they actually use. And they're looking at hundreds of millions of property developments at the moment. Really exciting business. It's definitely one to watch and one to keep an eye out for. And I wish them all the success in the world, because if they take off, they're going to go, to the moon. There's people talk about, the next unicorn or looking out, the next types of business. And I'd love to see a unicorn business come out of Leeds, and I'd love it to be Curve Block.
Fantastic. There will be a link in the show notes below, so anybody who wants to have a look at them, you'll be able to find them. Lee J, thanks very much indeed. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, and of use. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, please subscribe to the show. Go on, do it now. Do it now before you go off and do something else. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh, And don't forget our fair deal. See you next week.